Great to be here talking to Bob Moore. If you think you've heard of him before, you probably have. Not only is he the current co-founder and CEO of Crossbeam, which is an exciting collaborative data platform that helps companies build more valuable partnerships, but he is also the co-founder of RJ Metrics, which was acquired by Magento, and Stitch, which was acquired by Talent. So lots of experience there. But the most interesting thing I've read about Bob is that part-time or on your days off, you actually work in an improv theater.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you did the research. This is great. Yeah.
So if we get into trouble today, you have to take over.
That's great. Yeah, there may be a dinosaur that marches in from off stage or something, but we'll make it through.
Good. Fantastic. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey into ecosystems, where you started and how you got into it?
Yeah, I come into this world from a slightly non-traditional direction because my background before working in the world of ecosystems was in the world of data. I, as you mentioned, started these two companies. RJ Metrics was an analytics platform that helped e-commerce companies make sense of their data and make smarter decisions about customer acquisition. And then Stitch Data was even nerdier than that. It was a data infrastructure company that kind of sat at the inside of the modern data stack, helping people move data from point A to point B. And I really, at those companies and at the bigger businesses that acquired them, I just kept seeing the same problem over and over again in different flavors. When at RJ Metrics, for example, we started our technology partner ecosystem, we very often had these really simple questions that we wanted to answer in collaborating with our tech partners, like how many customers do we have in common and who are they? Or are my sales reps currently trying to sell to any of the same companies that your sales reps are trying to sell to? In the bigger businesses, in their channel programs, we have the same kinds of questions. And what I discovered was the universe of partnerships, alliances, channel, ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, was so much less data driven than all of the other pieces of the business. And there was a good reason for it, which is you only have half of the data. When you're working in these environments, what you're really trying to do is draw this Venn diagram between what you know and what your partner knows and find what's in the center of it and collaborate around that. But it turns out drawing that Venn diagram is really hard. And in all these companies, we found ourselves almost in kind of like this data standoff where, one side or the other had to overshare their total sales pipeline or their total customer list so that the other side could do the math and figure out.
You go first.
Yeah. Or you do these classic account mapping exercises where sales reps are emailing spreadsheets around with randomly selected lists of leads and customers that, not only is a huge security, privacy, kind of shadow IT risk, but it just doesn't work very well. Like the matching logic is often bad. You miss lots and lots of opportunity. The data gets stale really fast. So anyway, felt all these pains over and over again. And pattern recognition really kind of kicked in. And there was this aha moment toward the end of when we were building Stitch, where we realized that we could actually use all of the tools of the trade from the modern data stack. And by that, I mean, data pipelines, data warehousing, data transformation layers, online storage and processing to actually solve this prisoner's dilemma problem and create something entirely new. And that new thing is Crossbeam, and it's basically like an escrow service for data.
So fantastic amount of experience there. Our audience is, B2B, born in cloud, or else, legacy in cloud. You've traveled a long way in moving from one company to the other, looking at the data, analyzing it. How does somebody jump in and get started? There's that, I'm a firm believer that we can't go to ecosystem unless we clean up the problems we currently have. So that's the title of your session is garbage in, garbage out with data. But how do people get into that and get started before leaping?
Of course. Yeah. And it's, I love the title of this session because it could have been the title of a session I ran at any of my past companies. Like, this is not a problem that's exclusive to the partnerships universe. Garbage in, garbage out is the story of modern B2B success versus failure in a lot of ways. And I think the the real important thing to remember is that you can break these problems down into very, very simple, non-complex atomic units of data and information. And the question that I would ask is, can you log into your CRM system and build a report that tells you who is a customer and who is not a customer? Probably yes. Like that is a very table stakes level starting point. Like at least that field that determines whether that's true is probably there. Can you log in and see what's in your sales pipeline this quarter? What deals are being worked on and what might be able to close? Hopefully, yes. A lot of folks, even ones that feel like their CRM system is a nightmare and it's full of dirty data and there's this long tail of records that are untouched and unreliable, at least those records that are being worked on right now by your sales reps and might close in the next few months are probably up to date and accurate. What we need to do is grab the pieces of your sales funnel that are the most potentially relevant to a collaboration with a partner. And that's likely, your most important prospects and target companies, and also your active opportunities that you're selling into and your existing customer base. And starting there, we very often, the kickoff call that we'll have with new users is we walk through this thing we call the account mapping matrix, which is basically just a 3x3 matrix of my sales pipeline versus my partners. So if I've got prospects, opportunities, customers, and they've got prospects, opportunities, customers, you can create a little grid, and every single one of those boxes has a use case in it. So my customers versus your customers, if there's high overlap, if there's high value examples there, this is an opportunity to do joint case studies. It's an opportunity to upsell by selling our integration. It's a way to analyze whether we should build a technology integration or maybe start a partnership if it's a first time analysis. In the opposite corner, my prospects versus yours, this is all greenfield for both of us. But if the overlap is high, it shows we have a very similar ideal customer profile. Maybe we should be doing co-marketing. We should do webinars together. We should go to events jointly. We should tell more of a story for the top of the funnel about how compatible our platforms and our offerings are. Or if it's a channel partner, we should be going to market more proactively and spending more time together because the hit rate is going to be higher on these overlaps. And then all these boxes in the middle, this is where opportunities start to intersect with customers and with prospects. And you get these incredible moments that are fleeting because opportunities are the shortest time span, period of the customer life journey. But if you catch them in the moment, and I have an opportunity and you do at the same time, chances are that buyer is making a joint purchasing decision where they're buying services and technology all at once, or they're buying multiple technology products. And having our sales reps be connected and be aligned in that is huge. So when we talk about incorporating data into this ecosystem's play, what we're not talking about, let me compare my millions of records to your millions of records. In some cases, we can uncover millions of dollars of pipeline value by comparing hundreds of records. Like a small enough thing, like we connect to Google Sheets in addition to connecting to Salesforce, right? A lot of our customers do that. And if you want to go from 0 to 1, you might be amazed how much that power law applies. And the top 10% of the data that you've got actually equates to 90% of the value that you can get out. And it's an amazing way to show proof of value.
Okay. A lot of information there. Question I wanted to ask you was, we do a lot of research on the market, and through the programs that we run, we actually look at the IT market and the distribution channel partners and the full range. And what we find is that, one, there's a reluctance to collect data. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like doing research. Somebody else can do that, or we'll get to it at some point. And two, tend in the industry to simply gather data on what we've sold last. So the technical aspects of it. And what it sounds like to me, if I'm hearing this correctly, is what you're saying is the real value within the ecosystem is you can untap through data collection and analysis, lots of opportunities for net new, but also for share of wallet that aren't being exploited at a given time. So it's all new revenue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is not about getting yourself into one of these analysis paralysis situations. And in fact, I would say, in response to that reluctance to collect data, my favorite part about this entire strategy is that this is data you already have. Like there's not a need to flip a switch and grab new data points or start collecting at more granularity. This is what in my old business, we would refer to this as data exhaust, right? Like you are generating the inputs you need for this just by virtue of running your business, whether you realize it or not. And, assuming that you've got a CRM system, or honestly, even a spreadsheet based system for tracking what the most important things are in your sales pipeline and your customer base. If that's true, then you have the data that you need to be collaborating with partners. And the things that used to be hard about that, it had a lot less to do with what data you had, and a lot more to do with how the heck do you actually compare it to the partner, because you don't want to send that whole spreadsheet over the company wall, and you don't want to have to build the complicated Excel formula to figure out whether or not I'm selling to Delta Airlines and you're selling to Delta Faucets, and is it the same company, right? And this is where platforms like Crossbeam kind of come into play and can break down those problems into something that is a lot easier to digest, and you really just get the outputs out the other end. And those outputs, to your point, are all about incremental growth, and whether it's generating new ecosystem qualified leads from relationships that exist out there in your partner base, or it's advancing active deals faster, or expanding the average contract value of those deals, or it's growing existing closed customers. Again, if you go back to that matrix I mentioned, all the way up and down your revenue funnel, there's a place for partnerships to be a force multiplier if you just use the data to identify where to strike first.
And in those conversations, are you finding that this is all being led by the CEO, or are you, because you're uncovering lots of opportunity, you've got the data analysis bit, you have to share data between the sales teams, you need to market differently and go to market differently. Who's taking the lead on that in your experience, and what sort of things are being done differently?
Yeah, we do a lot of research on this actually here at Crossbeam. Every year we release a report called the State of the Partner Ecosystem, where we survey hundreds of partnership leaders across numerous verticals and geographies. And we get data on everything from salary band data to the work from home revolution, to this exact thing you're talking about. What do org charts look like? Who's actually driving the strategy behind ecosystem growth in a company? And statistically speaking, partnerships sits in the revenue or the sales org something around 60+% of the time. And then another about 25% of the time, it rolls directly up to the CEO. But we do see a correlation between company size and whether or not that CEO reporting structure exists. So typically, the larger the company gets, the more likely that partnerships has found a home in the revenue organization somewhere. As you get more senior leadership in place, and kind of more and more of these direct reporting structures kind of come off of the CEO's plate. But the important output of that is then, I think it's a good thing. We've actually seen that revenue reporting number increase over the years, in the last few years. The reason that I think it's positive is because I do think that partnerships, channel alliances ought to be held to a standard of being able to generate quantifiable, attributable ROI, and make it such that if you're going to make an investment as a company in this particular means of going to market and growing your business, it gets held to the same standard that a new marketing campaign would, or that hiring another sales rep would. Like there ought to be things you can point to say, look, this isn't just good on paper or good for a press release or a blog post. It's actually connected to growth in the actual revenue of the business. And this is, again, where without any data, you can't make that happen. And infusing even the simplest layer of awareness around being able to look back and say, hey, we closed 40 sales deals last quarter. 32 of them, the new customer already had a customer relationship with one of our ecosystem partners. The sales reps enlisted the help or the input from that ecosystem partner, or sold against the value of that integration or that services relationship in the course of winning the deal. Being able to point back to that answers that attribution question, and I think puts partnerships on the same playing field as the rest of those orgs. So, and I think the revenue and sales orgs tend to be the best at that from a quantitative standpoint.
They do, although the piece about where that came from and where it's attributed to, and the sales readiness component of it, often, in my view, gets pulled out of the ROI discussion when it's very much a factor within it. And the industry tends to overlean on expanding versus landing properly and getting all the things in place in order to make sure you can go after that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. In fact, another thing that we see in this State of the Ecosystem report, every year we see this kind of cognitive dissonance that exists among partnership professionals, where we ask a question like, how confident are you that you are generating quantifiable ROI for your business? And everybody's extremely confident. And then
Yes.
we ask, how much confidence do you think the rest of your business has that you are generating quantifiable ROI? And the confidence is always very low. And that's demonstrated through folks feeling like they don't get the kind of funding that is warranted, or they, can't hire at the rate that they think is deserved based on that performance. So, the output of that then is, how do we close that gap? And I think that's really what we're trying to solve for. And you're right, there will always be a quicker win or lower hanging fruit when you can just harvest as opposed to hunt, in terms of, let's use these relationships to expand these known in-hand accounts. And then sales reps are kind of out there a bit more out in the field, a few clips ahead, maybe a bit more of a lone wolf strategy, a bit more reluctant to enlist these resources from partners. But again, here, this is where, there can be a big difference between arming a sales rep with knowledge and context versus saying, hey, can you hop on a phone call with your super hot prospect to get on the phone with this partner? I think the former, the data, the context, it's almost in the same family as, everybody loves having their data enrichment tools inside of the CRM system, right? If you buy data from ZoomInfo or Clearbit or any of these companies, it's this third-party data that makes reps smarter. They care about that data. What you can pull in from your partner ecosystem is even better. It's second-party data. It's data that's coming from these relationships that you have, where it's exclusive to you and it's context specific to you. And that's where you start. You arm the reps with context and with knowledge, and don't take anything from them. Don't ask for, hey, can I have this meeting? Hey, can you put this account potentially at risk by exposing it to some partner that they might not be very familiar with? And that's kind of the crawl, walk, run. And once they learn things from that data, the openness to the partnership will grow over time. But yeah, I mean, this will be a thing we watch over the course of a decade, not a quarter or two, for sure. It's a revolution.
You said something that might have sounded alarm bells for some of our listeners out there. You said sharing data and being able to go after opportunity based on your partner's data.
Yeah.
What is the reluctance level to share data in your experience? Over here in Europe, we've got GDPR and people are ultra protective of data and getting almost too much so, in my view. But does that scare people off, or are they running toward it?
Yeah. So, we were a company that was actually founded in the same month that GDPR went live.
Oh, sorry.
And the thing about GDPR is that, so it's been GDPR and us have been joined at the hip from day one. But GDPR, while obviously actually legislated in Europe, it's a global thing, right? You can't find a U.S. company at scale that hasn't had to figure out whether they're incorporating the standard contractual clauses or figuring out some other means by which European data can make its way to U.S. servers. And that's still, you look at the headlines today, right? This is a thing that Facebook or Meta is like grappling with in a huge way, even in the last 24 hours or so. So what's been very, very crucial for us in building Crossbeam is that we actually view ourselves as a solution to this data sharing conundrum, as opposed to something that exacerbates the problem or should raise antenna around it. And really what we're doing is putting absolute control in the hands of the data owner here to decide who sees what, when, and under what circumstances. Now, because we're in the world of B2B, there's an enormous amount that you can do right off the bat to protect yourself from the implications of GDPR, which is to completely strip out all personally identifiable information from everything we're talking about here. Whether it is the identities of the people that are at the prospect companies you're selling to, or even the people at your partner companies, if there's concern over that PII, you have the ability within Crossbeam to say, look, we're only going to look at business level data. We're only going to look at kind of these business to business relationships. And that alone very often is enough to kind of context switch from this idea that we're data sharing to this idea that we're actually engaging in a partnership that's governed by its own partner terms and its own NDAs and privacy covenants. And that allows kind of this one-to-one collaboration to happen between companies to run the ball, the rest of the way. to the finish line. So what ends up happening then is what security and privacy and compliance teams look at, and we've gone through this with countless, publicly traded companies in the US and in Europe. They want to know about transparency. They want to be able to audit at any given time who has access to what, who has set up, those rules.
Sure.
They want to be able to have their own governance layer around their own privacy agreements and partnership agreements in terms of what is fair use of the data, what the expectations are around being able to do things like make delete requests and other things into the partners. And ultimately, they want to know that the data set is being reduced down such that nothing is being shared where the counterparty, your partner, doesn't already have some version of their own relationship already with this party, that they have their own kind of privacy governance around. So really what you're uncovering here, you're never learning about a net new human and their contact information and their identity. You're never really even learning about a net new business, depending on how you set it up. What you're doing is surfacing this collaboration area that exists between relationships that each party already has and already has a privacy relationship against. And then that boils down to a lot less to do with the governing law and a lot more to do with the individual privacy policies and standards that exist within a company and how they like to collaborate inside of their partner ecosystem. And it varies company to company, but the reality is that there's always an answer. I think we haven't seen in any kind of large scale pattern, in any geography, people saying, hey, this is physically impossible or against what we want to do. In a lot of cases, people say, finally, thank you. I can stop worrying about these spreadsheets that are getting emailed around with a ton of PII in them that have no governance around them, that are a complete risk vector for our company. And instead, we can kind of wrap our own set of controls around this very kind of customizable platform from a data security standpoint.
Separate question, just because you made me think of it.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any early ecosystem partner programs?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I think where we see this is a classic like crossing the chasm thing, because you get in the early days, you get these early adopters who are kind of innovators and glass chewers and folks that are willing to kind of trip and fall on their face a couple times and then get up, dust themselves off and try again. And then you have this big, delayed effect, and then you have kind of mass adoption that happens over time. And I think, even when we started back in around 2018, 2019, we were seeing those early adopters all over the place. And by and large, where we see them, unsurprisingly, was in the universe of venture-backed high-growth technology companies, mostly like funded out of Silicon Valley VC firms, right? It's folks that are typically on the bleeding edge of business strategy and growth strategy. They're very well funded, so they have the ability to probably take on disproportionate risk in terms of uncovering new growth dimensions. And it's very often companies that are product companies, vendors in kind of traditional speak, that want to make sure that they are kind of ecosystem first in how they build their company.
But these are startups. These are not legacy companies, so to speak, companies who've been in the business.
Yeah, I would absolutely, yes. I'd say startups is defined as like started within the last 5 to 7 years. And what's amazing now, though, is, you rewind the clock to that vintage of companies, say, 5+ years old, that are in that cohort of being venture backed and being ecosystem first. And now they're IPOing, right? And they're kind of, from a market cap and a size and employee count standpoint, are toe to toe with legacy companies. And you don't need to look much farther than some of the highest market cap companies that are out there, whether it's somebody like Snowflake, or it's somebody in the universe of vertical SaaS like a Procore that had an awesome IPO last year, or folks that are kind of in the community, revolutionizing the communication space like a Twilio, where they've been able to build really large, impressive businesses. But you take a step back and you look at go to their partner page and check out the story that they're telling about their own ecosystem, and it's absolutely incredible. Like in all three of those cases, the integrations with technology partners and service partners and development and engineering partners that have been so crucial to the growth stories of these businesses. Like, open up their S1 and search for the word partner and look at how many matches you get. These are ecosystem first companies that have thrived and that have been able to kind of make it to that scale that a lot of legacy companies are at in terms of their maturity. So I think we've gone far enough now in this cycle where we have a vintage of companies that have been successful enough that they've gotten very large and shown that it continues to work when you get that large. And now you have an expectation that happens with new startups that are happening, that if you're not on this train, then you're missing a major area of growth and opportunity in kind of the standard playbook for how you build a high growth business. Getting back to the crossing the chasm thing, this is exactly what you always end up seeing, which is now that you've had some companies make it through the whole life cycle and make it with this strategy underfoot, this is where you get the proof points and the validation that allows legacy companies to be able to internally advocate for these things and start to move themselves toward adopting these strategies themselves.
Yeah, and looking at the roadmaps and seeing how that matches with their status quo, and how they want to make that move.
Very true.
Very interesting. We're going to continue this conversation later on with our executive roundtable discussion. But before I let you go, you've had a lot of experiences. You know a lot about ecosystems and generally what's happening in the market. But is there anything that you are wondering about? Anything that if you could look in a crystal ball and see what happens in 5 years, you'd like to see?
Yeah, it's related to what we were just talking about, which is, you get this thing that happens not just in tech, it's kind of this global effect where like the reputation of a thing lags its reality by a decade in a lot of, maybe in tech it's by 5 years, but I do think, some of the things you called out are so incredibly true. And we see this in our state of the partner ecosystem report, where partner teams feel underappreciated. They feel like the reputation of what partnerships are and what they can bring to the table lags the reality by 5 years, 10 years. And it's kind of deeply rooted in the instincts of a lot of leaders of a lot of companies, because they've seen it kind of be a lesser version of itself in an era before a lot of these data-driven changes have happened. But it's turning a new page. We're seeing the incredible results of adopting these strategies at a lot of growth companies. And now the question is, what's the amount of time until that gap starts to really close and the reputation catches up with it as well? So, partnerships are everywhere, especially channel partnerships. And, we'd love to see what we're seeing happen in high tech cross that chasm sooner rather than later. But I also feel like we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and that's exciting work to do.
Fantastic. So time to close.
Yeah.
Basically, what you'd like to know.
Yeah.
Perfect way to stop. We'll talk to you later on. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your insights into this.
Great. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.